Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us to celebrate World Taste and Smell Day. I am Gabrielle Marks of Trend Insight, and I recently joined the World Taste and Smell Association Events Committee. My decision to join was extremely important and personal to me because I became a nosmic due to a severe childhood head injury. Before we begin the Nostalgia event, I wanted to thank Amy Marks McGee and Ariella Halperin, who are part of the events committee, as well as board members Stephanie Fewer and Mindy Yang, who helped put this webinar together. I'd also like to share some background about the World Taste and Smell Association. The World Taste and Smell Association is a 501c3 nonprofit. It's dedicated to fostering appreciation and understanding of the vital yet often neglected and overlooked senses of taste and smell. It was founded during the pandemic when millions lost their sense of taste and smell. Through our platform, worldwide activities, advocacy, and community outreach, we strive to raise awareness about the impact of taste and smell on our daily lives. Through the flagship event, World Taste and Smell Day, held annually on September 14th, Delicious for All Culinary Challenge, and a variety of other initiatives. The World Taste and Smell Association strives to celebrate how taste and smell enrich our daily lives and contribute to our happiness, health, and well-being. Foster empathy and support for individuals living without taste and smell, and advocate for increased awareness of the prevalence of taste and smell disorders and the need for greater understanding and support the general public and medical community. Serve as a digital platform and gathering place for content, activities, initiatives that deepen our understanding and appreciation of these essential senses, and recognize that discoveries and innovation that expand our sensory horizons. We are here today to learn about the intersection of smell and nostalgia and how olfaction bridges the gap between memories and emotions. At the end of the presentation, there will be time for Q&A. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our three nostalgia hosts, Sophia Colette Eric, Amarens Igarat, and Lisa Marie Schneider. I'd also like to introduce our two guests. Pachaya Nome Chiron and Florence Marceau Lafleur. Okay, thank you. Sophia, I'm handing this over to you.
Okay, one moment. Oops. Okay. Sorry for the little bit of housekeeping here, but so hello, my name is Sophia Colette Eric, and I am delighted to be here on September 14th to honor World Taste and Smell Day 2023. I want to start out by thanking Gabrielle and the rest of the team at the World Taste and Smell Association for inviting us to participate and the opportunity to highlight Kunstlicht's nostalgia issue. We are very excited to be part of the incredible lineup of events today. This event will highlight various contributions to the nostalgia issue of the Kunstlicht Journal, which was co-edited by myself and Amarens Igarat. We have invited two of the contributors to the journal to join us today. Firstly, storyteller Pachaya Namcharon, who will read an excerpt from her text, In Search for Common Sense. And secondly, artist Florence Marceau Lafleur, who will be interviewed by Amarens about the artwork she submitted to the issue. And lastly, Amarantz will present her own text, Dead Rats, Paper and Hot Dusty Air, Finding the Lost Sense of the VND. We will finish the event by opening up for discussion and questions. Before we invite our guests, we will start the evening with a little introduction. Evening for me, sorry, I'm in the Netherlands. With a little introduction to the idea of nostalgia, its inspiration, and how the idea was communicated through our issue. Throughout time, smells and the act of smelling, also known as olfaction, have been overlooked in Western arts, culture, and media. However, our sense of smell's direct link with our brain's limbic system means that when we smell, it activates our memory and emotion in impactful ways. This makes olfaction a powerful pathway and tool to connect with our own past and that of other people and places, as well as an interesting precursor to nostalgic perception. Nostalgia, not nosetalgia, is defined as a wistful or excessively sentimental yearning to return to a past period or irrecoverable condition. Commonly thought of as the emulation of an aesthetic, we take a more sensory approach to nostalgic perception. How does the feeling of nostalgia go beyond a visual phenomenon and become multisensory? For example, I experience nostalgia and extreme joy from pressing these little buttons at crosswalks, as they have not existed in most of Los Angeles since the early 2000s. I listened to Jackson Browne's I'm Alive album from 1989 when I want to remember childhood road trips through the California desert with my mother. But we've all experienced it, the whiff of something that instantly immerses us in a personal memory, but also comes with a melancholy feeling. And do we wish we were back there in that time and place? The smell really brings us close to that original live memory, something pretty unique to the abilities of olfaction. This is what we mean with the term nosetalgia. We break down nostalgia into three ideas: collecting, sharing, and connecting. And these concepts greatly shape our identity and experiences. Firstly, collect. What does it mean to collect nostalgia? And why should we do so? Is this collection intentional or unintentional? How can we revisit these memories? We all know that scents are fleeting, and arguably so are memories. What about scents or scented practices that represent something we don't want to lose or that we want to safeguard for future generations? Or endangered scents at risk of disappearing? Or some we have already personally lost throughout our lifetime? My personal nostalgia collection features the fresh and crisp scent of a magazine stand, the surprisingly yet musty odor of the Berlin U-Bahn, the very particular composition of smells that fill American shopping malls, particularly that of the one in Santa Monica where I shopped as a kid. I think it was something about the fragrant food court mixed with the somewhat unpleasant faint sewer smell coming from the recycled fountain that streamed throughout the building. It is important to notice that our experience of smells is subjective. Whether a scent is good or bad does not make it any less important to collect. Secondly, share. We can collect to share with our families and friends, past and future generations. Sharing our nostalgia can help us reinforce our own identity and relate that to that of others, or perhaps even learn more about histories or the histories of others. Upon sharing personal accounts of nostalgia, we can make connections, whether that is between unlikely concepts, unlikely souls, or the creation of a community. Nostalgia can be collective, establish compassion, and build new bridges between similar or different cultures. Nostalgic connections can make us feel warm and fuzzy or sentimental. So what are some examples where nostalgia has been collected, shared, and built connections? Art historian Carl Verbeek coined the term nostalgia through the curation of the pop-up exhibition Nosetalgia, the temporary museum of smelly toys, in which he presented a collection of smelly toys owned by various individuals. Past owners of the objects shared memories with Verbeek, which she presented with the object itself. One owner of Hasbro's Play-Doh shared, "It smelled so nice, I wanted to eat it." I think many of us can connect with that comment. In 2020, artists Regina Mamou and Laura Salmon of Research for the Bermuda Triangle ventured to Berlin, Germany, with a mission to collect objects from the former German Democratic Republic. Playing on the term Ostalgie, a combination of the German Ost or East and Nostalgia, their goal was to take common objects from former East Germany and make them into a tinctured smell. From Caro cigarettes to Hansa cookies, the project, which people could visited by the public at the Venda Museum in Los Angeles, California, successfully connected not only those who remembered these items from their past through scents, but also offered those scents to new generations. At the Outreach Lab of the Museum of Everyday Life in Ghent, Belgium, visitors, especially the elderly, were invited to intimately interact and handle the collection items to assist well-being and care. Offering all sorts of items, including scented objects, the museum said that they have built a community and intimate groups that continuously come back to talk to each other and connect over the past memories related to their multisensory engagement with these items. For the nostalgia issue, we wish to explore these ideas further. What are nostalgic memories? How have smell, art, and nostalgia interacted and overlapped? Is olfaction a form of nostalgia, or is smelling nostalgia? Does it fulfill a special longing for the past? And with that, I pass it on to Emma Renz to introduce the articles you can read in Nosetalgia. Thanks for listening.
Cool. So let me see. So yeah, my name is Amarens. I work as a writer and a journalist in the Netherlands, and I'm not necessarily officially part of the smell world, if there's even such a thing, but I'm just really obsessed with it. So I've been very happy to have the opportunity to be involved in this project. I think my obsession with smell stems from a few years ago when I wanted to write an article about the distinctive smell of the Hema, which is a Dutch chain store, which is famous for its smoked sausage and affordable socks and stuff like that. And for that article, I spoke to smell historian Caro Verbeek, who Sophia just mentioned. And that's when I realized there's actually a whole field of people who work with smell, research smell every day. And ever since, it's been a major interest in my life. And that's also how I met Sophia, because I wanted to interview her about the historic smell tour she organized in the center of Amsterdam, with a scratch and sniff card containing, amongst others, the smell of a canal full of turds and dead cats. That was very interesting to me. And I think it's very great that the academic work into smell history by people like Sophia mean that we develop more ways to talk and write about smell, also outside the world of luxury restaurants and perfume, which is often where you find, writing about smell. Especially a combination of smell and the past is really exciting to me. There's a beautiful poem by a Dutch poet called Lieke Marsman, who writes, all memories from youth become smells. And that is sort of how I think about it. So working on this issue was great. Also because we received such a wild variety of responses and ideas to our question, what is nostalgia? Let me see. Here we are, all the people who contributed to Nosetalgia. I will now briefly go through the texts that you can find in our magazine, especially the ones of the contributors who are not here today. So to start off with, our magazine, this is it. Oh, you can't really see it, never mind. It really smells amazing. And that is thanks to the work of Lucie Lefranc, who is a perfumer who works in Paris. And she designed the smell that is printed on the little smell card that comes with our issue. She wrote about it too. The text, A Year of Fear of Losing You. She writes about the fear she had during the COVID pandemic of losing her sense of smell, with her work as a perfumer, that would, of course, mean a disaster, even more than for most of us. And it caused her to live, as she calls it, through her nose. So she gathered these specific smell memories, and in the lab, she tried to recreate it. In order to do that, she had to break down these smells into their parts, basically. So as an example, for the smell of a dingy old cinema in Paris called La Clé, she uses Evernil, Heliotropin, Patchouli, and black spruce. And the smell that she made for our magazine is called La Pleine Lune du Portemontin. And it's based on how she feels when on an evening she leaves the big busy city and she arrives in the countryside. It smells really good, a bit like really fancy soap. And you know, the interesting thing is, for me now, it reminds me of the time that we all came together and presented our magazine. So it's become nostalgic, yeah, doubly nostalgic in a way. But then we didn't only have like these very pleasant, I mean, nostalgia causes you to think of pleasant things, but we had an article by Lu Yangming, where the dominating smell is not so pleasant. It's about tear gas. Because Ming is an artist who was present during the very large pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong in 2019, which was a big movement that unfortunately didn't quite reach the goals it set out to reach. It's very impressive to read her article. It's basically a logbook from that time where she sort of presents us with what she sees and does, but also with what she smells. And it sort of presents us with the question, how can we stay connected with these revolutionary experiences as time passes on and movements become repressed again? And can smell play a role in that? Dimitra Trivka, she wrote a very interesting article about the work of artist Molly Soda. Soda did an internet performance in 2021 called My Candle Collection, where she tries to convey the smells of scented candles through words. So we see her sniff the candles and then talk about it. This was also sort of a COVID solution because her original work were the candles themselves, where people could pick them up and smell them. But yeah, even though it seemed like a sort of emergency solution, the fact that it was broadcasted on YouTube meant that it was accessible to lots more people. So Dimitra basically examines what happens in this work and how Soda links the smell of candles not only to memory and nostalgia, but also to aspirations, like how certain good smells can be aspirational, like a candle that is called White Mercedes. Then, to continue, Dagmar Boegert turned the concept of nostalgia completely upside down by delving into the cooking practices and banquets of the early 20th century futurist art movement in Italy. The futurists didn't like nostalgia all that much, so they came up with ways to reinvent Italian cuisine and to introduce multi-sensory ways of presenting and eating food. It's really interesting. Smell is often linked to nostalgia and memory, but in the case of the futurist movement, they did the opposite. They wanted to imagine or use smell as a sense for imagining an alternative future. So it became the smell of change, you could say. In this article, you'll also find a futurist-inspired recipe from Dagmar as a conclusion that includes ingredients like an open mind. So yeah, Sophia wrote a beautiful interview with Caro Verbeek as well, but we already heard a little bit about that. And we also had beautiful visual contributions, one by Florence Marceau-Lafleur, but we will talk to her later. And then there's also, you can see it on the screen, a smell poem by Lara Lindsay Parker, which is something I can't really describe. You just have to see it and experience it, I think. So yeah, that is our issue. And I will now give the word to Lisa.
Thank you very much. Let's see. Yeah. I hope you can all hear me now. I heard I was muted. Well, thank you very much, Amarens and Sophia. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Marie Snyder. I'm the editor-in-chief of Kunstlicht. And I first of all want to thank Sophia and Amarens for inviting us, of course, and making this fantastic issue together and really opening my eyes, but technically my sense of smell throughout this process. And I also want to thank the World of Taste and Smell Day for inviting us to be part of this very special day. So I'm very happy to be here. As Sophia and Amarens already brought you up to speed on what the issue entailed and how it actually came to be, what the ideas are, I will just give you a quick background to what Kunstlicht is and how we work. So Kunstlicht is an academic journal for art, visual culture, and architecture. We publish 2 to 3 times a year, and each issue focuses on a new theme. So basically, we try to look at our world that surrounds us through a creative but also an academic lens. The journal has actually been around for quite a while because it actually originated in 1980 and has been associated with the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam since then, but we work as an independent organization. Our editorial team is a combination of alumni and current students of various universities in the Netherlands, so not only from the VU, and we work with guest editors each time. So this time we worked with Amarens and Sophia. It was such a pleasure actually to work on this nostalgia issue because I featured other ones on this slide because, well, we did other issues as well. But it was such a pleasure to work on this nostalgia issue and actually to learn so much about how influential smell is in our understanding about the world and especially also of our culture. And how that has not been addressed enough in current research and in presentation of art, if you may say. So this is also something we wanted to challenge with the publication of this issue. So yeah, I hope you all really enjoy, hopefully reading it at some point and have enjoyed the introductions. And we will dive a bit further, of course, into some of our articles and our visual contributions. But if you want to read it in print, it's a beautifully printed journal with a smell card, as we said. Just go to our website and I put it on the slide here and we'll send it to you. All right, thank you very much. I would like to hand over to the first speaker of the evening from the articles.
I just wanted to also remind everyone that if you have questions, please do put them in the chat so that we can add them to our discussion at the end of the evening. I'm going to now spotlight Pichaya, who will read an excerpt from her article.
Hi, my name is Pichaya.
Oh, hold on one moment. Sorry. Stop slide control. Okay.
Hi, shall I start?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. My name is Pichaya Ngamsaron. I'm from Thailand. Now I live in the Netherlands, and I'm really happy to participate in this nostalgia issue. In my text, I'm writing the text called In Search for Common Sense. It's basically about the smells. It's about thinking about the smells that I don't remember or not having so much access space. I'm going to start reading excerpts from the text, and the part of it's going to be the interview, but I'm reading it alone, so it might be a little bit confusing, but I will try. Right. Maybe it's not about what we remember, but rather what we don't remember that make us long for something unknown. When one migrates, the change of landscape offers a variety of new smells. If smells trigger memories, changing of smellscape may cause a loss of connection to one's identity, memories, and emotions relate to the past smell. I wonder about what we forget, only because we don't have access to those common, daily, but also somewhat particular combinations of smells. I'm originally from Thailand. Moving to the Netherlands was one of the most challenging things I've ever done. The country felt extremely clean and sterile environment, which add to the severity of my homesickness. There are no smells that make me feel at rest. In fact, I did not smell anything at all when I first arrived. If lack of smell caused one to lose a previous sense of belonging and selfhood, how can we bring back the smells from our past and use them to help revisit our experience and process our internal struggles? A small bottle of cooling oil has been in my companion for the past year. I suddenly adopt a habit of rubbing this oil on my lower back, shoulder, and the chest area close to my heart. It smells very familiar. After a wave of extreme homesickness, it might just be another coping mechanism, I thought. I have, one night I started massaging my neck with the oil, and the memory just suddenly hit me like in a movie. I had such a clear vision of my grandmother laying on a soft mat as my family masseuse give her a back massage. I barely looked at them at the time out of awkwardness because I was a kid, but I smelled the cooling oil. My grandmother and I used to shower together when I was very little. And after the shower, then she would put on this oil on her body. This cooling oil appeared again in my life around the time that my grandmother passed away. It was only a year after that I realized I used this oil to ease my mind, to bear the guilt of not being with my grandmother in the last moment, nor saying goodbye or taking a part in her funeral. I use it to remember her, to feel close to her, and to help process the loss at my own pace. The muscle ache, the smell of the cooling oil remind me that loss and grief are part of growth and that growth can be painful. Fortunately, I remember this cooling oil, but what smells have I forgotten? I keep wondering what I forget, what we as a diasporic community forget because we don't have the access to some of those past familiar smells. Furthermore, I'm curious to find the connection I might have with others through the smells memories can evoke. I had a few conversations with people using the smell as a guiding material. And after explaining my hypothesis and a short introduction, we start sniffing samples, the smell material, which can come in a different form. It can come in a tincture form, cosmetics, or dry material, liquid or powder. And what I do is that I usually take those smells out of contact and maybe change its forms. So for example, the cosmetic material, then I would take it out of the package so that the people would speak to me do not see the package itself. One of the conversations I have was with Lotte, and we were colleagues for 2 years in a cafe, serve Japanese desserts, cakes, and drinks. More than half of the employees are Asians, and I worked there as a baker in this place for a year when Lotte joined the team. To me, she looked like a typical cooling Dutch person. She was a little shy at first, but soon after I discovered that she's a vibrant person who loves art and Southeast Asian inspired music. I'm well aware that everybody needs to work for money at some point, yet a small part of me was wondering why out of so many cafes in Rotterdam, where we both live, she chose to work at this one. We sat on a cushion the opposite side of each other. The bottle and the smell materials are in the middle between us. And I start to have a conversation with her. What is your childhood like, Lotte? I'm asking in general, since we all have such a different experience, how was it for you? She replied, I am born and raised in the Netherlands. My parents are Dutch. They work a lot and they have work from home 2 or 3 days a week. We had a babysitter. She was like a second mother to me. Her name was Joy, and she was from Thailand. I really like going to her house. I went there until I was 12. During the school break, we would eat at her house. It was just 5 minutes away from home. Did she cook for you, Lotte? Did you remember if you have a favorite meal? I asked. Always. She was always in the kitchen cooking. She was always cooking warm food for me. So I grew up with a warm meal for lunch every day, which, to give you a bit of context, it's not very common in the Netherlands, as I know. Her chicken recipe was delicious, but I don't know what it's called. It was a sort of fried chicken. It was so good. She always made fried prawns that come with a sauce, a sweet and spicy sauce. I asked her, so I replied, prawn is a big thing in Thailand. And many of Asian culture, we use dry, fresh, fermented ones to turn them into sauce. And then we put this sauce in a different dishes. Anyway, aside from Joy, did you have another nanny? Lotte replied, no, it was just Joy and her kids, who were like a second sister to me. My sister and I were around 5 or 6 years old. When Joy and her husband traveled, they would bring the kids to our house. They felt like family to me. I asked her, what was it completely Thai family, or was it a Thai lady with a Dutch person? And she replied that Joy is a Thai lady with a Dutch husband. And I was curious, so I asked her if they cook Western food, and Lotte was saying that not really, and Joy would only cook Thai food for her. I then hand to Lotte a small liquid, white, almost transparent, a little bit of white liquid, and asked her if she remembers it. She said, it smells like when I was in holiday in Bali, but I don't know what it is. I explained to her that this is a modern Thai version of a scented water that was used as a perfume, and it's made out of different type of tropical flowers. Some herbs, some jasmine, some ylang-ylang, and the strong notes, that was the strong notes. Lotte said that it really smells like what I smelled in Bali. It's like a vacation with my parents. We went to Singapore and then we went to Bali. I have been a lot of places, but in Singapore, just the humidity itself is hard to handle. On the first day, everybody was struggle because the breathing was so hard, but after 2 days, it became normal. And she remembers that people there are using this flower extract. I then handed her another white powder, which she asked me, what is it? I tried to ask her to smell it again. I then tell her it is a powder that we put on the face, and it's known to be for good skin. Lotte said that I remember me being a kid and Joy would sit on her little chair. She would apply this to her skin. It is a bit painful situation with Joy. Although I still see her children a lot, I do not see Joy anymore. Her children have her own kids now, but sometimes something happened to Joy. I think she felt on her head. She's no longer wanted to be in the society and she closed off from it. Her husband did not encourage her enough to bike again. So now she sit at home and it is sad. I also heard Joy wanted to open a restaurant in the Netherlands, but somehow it did not happen. I also heard from her adult children that when they were younger and they visited the Dutch grandparents, they were quite unwelcoming and discriminated against them. They would say, oh, you are so dumb. And their children were not at all close to be dumb. sorry. Well, Lotte was saying that it was also a joyful memory that she have, but it's also really sad. I don't know, she doesn't know the full history of this family, but it's also great to look back and to remember a bit. And maybe, I think, maybe it is this moment when smells can lead the conversation and restore memories and discover a connection that we did not know exist. It is by coincidence that I was able to have this conversation with Lotte. I did not know that she had a Thai babysitter whom she was also loved and cherished as a second mother. But looking back now, I clearly see a trace of a small factors that brought us to the same place, where a few smells memory that we have in common, although we have shared experience with different places, times, and events, we both somehow had lost connection and daily access to smells that remind us of these joyous yet considerably painful experience. Sometimes it's easier to ignore one's own negative memory, but its remaining effects would still cause conflictual sensation, many times resulting in actions we do not yet understand. Having the chance to smell these scents again allow Lotte and I to reconnect with our memories and emotion, which may have taken a part in our decision-making without notice. Emotions are always communicated to us through our physical symptoms, and one of the first steps to decoding what these signals or symptoms are trying to tell us is to remember. And that was a part of my text in the book, in the publication. And next, I'm going to hand the mic to, excuse my pronunciation, Amarens Excerpt and Florian's Massolefleur.
Yes, thank you.
Give me one moment. Sorry. Going to. Almost there. Okay. Florence, you should be able to start now. Or move the slides.
Cool. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little interview with Florence Marceau-Lafleur, who is a visual artist who contributed to our issue. So yeah, I'll be asking some questions. So Florence, your work often features aspects of the human body. And when we presented our magazine in Real, you brought your nose flute, and you even played it, which was really nice to hear. What made you want to center the nose?
Well, maybe I can show you a little. Yes. Now I go back. Okay. Well, that is a little bit of a long story before I came to the nose, but to start with, the nose flute or nose whistle is actually part of a broader project that is inspired by my side job as an art model in art academies. So I actually started to model as an art student because it just gave me the possibility to own my own time and just really look at things. So as I spent many hours sitting still, I realized that contemplation made me experience different forms of physicality. I also noticed that there were ways of thinking and perceiving that were proper to the place of the life class, and particularly to the situation of the model sitting still in this context. So I decided to explore these thoughts, take them seriously, And so for several years, I dedicated my work as an artist to the materialization of, well, a sort of site-specific subjectivity. So one of the things that struck me about the many places where I modeled is that I really kept encountering the same items, and especially fragments of Michelangelo's David. That's because traditionally, the facial features of David are used to teach the basics of portraiture. And so because of that, art models are bound to spend much time in the company of David's facial feature. So many times I found myself facing walls adorned with eyes, noses, mouths, and ears. And while looking at these sensory symbols, I focused on, well, my own sensory canals, on the distance between them, and on the fact that they were scattered on my body, like David's sensory symbols were scattered on the wall. So at times, I imagined myself to be like a space within a space, like the site of the room with its senses, and the site of my own body and its senses. And over time, I imagine the room and I to be like really one entity, and that our senses could communicate with each other. So basically, I created my series of nose whistles with this idea in mind, to sort of signal the aliveness of a room I was part of. And now I'm going to show you the nose in action. Oh, I'm trying to, but the video doesn't play. Can you, Amaranth, is it working? Or
There we go.
yes, thank you. Well, to come back to your question, why did I center especially on the nose? I think it's because the nose matches the form of physicality I experience while sitting still. What you have to imagine is that when you spend extensive amount of time contemplating, you perceive the difference between yourself and the surroundings less clearly. So sometimes this phenomenon is called the oceanic sensation. So typically it is like the mystical sensation, just the fact of feeling one with the entire world. But I found it interesting to explore it in a non-religious context. So to me, the nose symbolizes a form of boundlessness between the perceiver and the perceived. Like the opposite is actually happening with the eyes. Like to look at something, it always involves distance, but to smell, you have to absorb some chemical compounds from what you perceive. You are enveloped in the same atmosphere. So the nose whistle goes against the stereotype of the life class as a situation dividing artists and models, object and subject. I aimed at building imagery originating from the same place, from the same classical studio situation, but from a different perspective. And well, somewhat more simply and perhaps more arbitrarily, the nose reminds me of a sort of shrine, and its architectural quality seemed ideal to host my inner world.
Thank you. That's all very interesting. And you said your nose whistle is based on the nose of Michelangelo's David. Have you ever thought about what David, the statue, would smell if he could smell?
Well, no, actually, not at all. And so I'm very glad that you asked the question. Actually, I just found, like just the view on the wall with all David's scattered senses more appealing than the original. So yeah, this played more of a role to me, but there is something I do like about Michelangelo's David, about the original compared to previous representations of the hero, that you just don't see, fighting with Goliath or just standing victorious above his head. You actually don't see Goliath, but you feel that David stares at him before the fight actually takes place. So similarly, I assume that David is actually smelling his enemy while we can't. So actually, while I modeled, I heard the sculpture made a subtle observation about David's eyes, and I wonder if it also holds true for David's nose. So she said that one of his eyes expresses courage. I think it's the left one, while the other shows some signs of fear. So maybe David's nose speaks slightly different notes of the smell of Goliath, depending on the nostril.
Very interesting. Maybe some perfumer could create that smell for us at some point. So ways of witnessing seem to play an important theme in your work, or a role in your work. Would you agree? And do you think that smell in particular can play a useful part in making and appreciating art?
Yeah, actually, you're right. Superimposing different ways of witnessing is something I'm interested in. And part of my work consists of booklets gathering short texts that alternate different viewpoints or different senses. Some are about smell, others are about a tactile approach to vision, which are both overlooked aspects of perception. But I don't, single out smell or the tactile gaze as concepts I would like to promote or tools I could use. It's more that ordinarily, while going through life, I encounter situations I cannot make complete sense of because they are not traditionally represented or symbolized. So then I want to draw, sculpt, write, or perform to ensure that what I experience actually exists, even when it is absent from the art.
That's a nice artist's intention. Thank you very much. Do you also find inspiration in other art that features smell or noses?
Well, yeah, in general, what inspires me more is more like, first-hand experience of life. But of course, there are artists I very much admire. So one of them is Femi Ota. Oh, I'm going to get back to Femi.
It's nice to hear it again, though.
It's in the next slide. Yeah, so Femi Ota is on the left, and she has carved aggregates of noses into a piece of wood. And some of our recent works are made of wax, and wax is naturally very fragrant. So she has also made like very large pedestals of wax, and this emphasizes the fragility of our work while making them more monumental. And the smell as well just fills up the room and then really creates like a context, like a world you can enter with materials that remain natural and whose multisensory qualities are really a sheer overlooked wonder. The same holds true for example, she keeps leftovers of her wood sculpture, then she puts them on the ground, and then you can really smell the quality of the wood in the entire show. You don't only see a wooden sculpture. Well, and on the other hand, I have quite bad memories of artificial smells in exhibition. Like I remember a show that was sponsored by a perfumer, and the entire show smelled like really terribly like expensive perfume. But there is a fragrant artwork that intrigues me. I've seen photographic documentation, but I've not been able to smell it with my own nose yet. It is Edward Kinholt's The Binary. It is what you see on the right. And it actually represents the interior of a bar in Los Angeles, Barney's Binary. And it includes the smells, the sounds, and also models of the customer are sort of, surrealistic figures hunting their own space-time. So these are smell-related works I find very interesting.
Cool. So our whole issue was, of course, about the link between smell and nostalgia memory. Is that something you use in your own creative process?
Well, I work with different media, so there are always different smells pervading my studio depending on the period. So for example, last summer I worked with epoxy, last fall I worked with papier-mâché, last winter I worked with artificial wax, and in the spring I used ink on paper. So each of these materials is fragrant, so there is a sort of olfactive chronology in the way I recall my creative path. So when I look back at my work, at what I've been doing in the last year, also to understand how to go on, I sort of smell back, and so I trace my way. So remembering the smell gives me a more instinctive overview of my work than my visual memory. So yeah, actually we traditionally associate smell with taste, and we often limit both of these senses to the satisfaction of our so-called animal needs, whereas we associate vision as a means to find control and mentally grasp our environment. But to me, smelling back at my work, well, it remains a sort of private logic, but it is definitely a way for me to keep a mental grasp on what I am making, of, you know, elaborating the sort of chronology and giving direction to my work.
Yeah, so sort of like your personal way of thinking about your work is also influenced by your smell
But
memory.
of course, it is also difficult to share because of course,
no, I understand.
vocabulary is limited.
My last question would be, do you have any favorite or a very significant smell memory?
Well, I of course have very, very fond memories of the smells of my studio, but actually the most striking memory is about a sort of non-smell. So I was working on a large black and white drawing. So I was carefully rendering the shades using different materials, charcoal and ink, but in different states. So charcoal sticks, charcoal pencil, charcoal powder, liquid inks, marker, alcohol-based pens, and also cuttlefish ink jelly. So as you can imagine, it was already a significant olfactory experience, especially for the cuttlefish, of course. Well, but at some point, I thought I could create deeper blacks in the background by mixing large quantities of charcoal powder and casein. So, okay, I mix it, I prepare this sort of paint, and I apply it generously on the background. And well, the result really struck me, not only because the black had become so strong that it illuminated the other parts, but also because the paint had an equally magic olfactive characteristic. It had suppressed all the smells in my studio. And it's actually because activated charcoal really has the property to absorb odors. So I was really quite thrilled with the surprise, like the opposite of light was also the opposite of smell. So just as the dark background illuminated the lighter parts, the activated charcoal made me love even deeper all the smells it had swallowed. And that's really my favorite smell, non-smell memory.
That's really impressive. I'm really curious to smell it myself now, or not smell it myself. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all your answers, and of course for your work in our issue.
Thank you.
I think we can continue to our next part, which I'm afraid it's going to be me again. But I'll talk a little bit about my article for this issue. So yeah, like I mentioned in the introduction, I am really fascinated by the smells of shops. And somewhere basically probably during a lockdown, I was sort of sitting and wondering about the lost smell of V&D or V&D, which, if you don't know, and if you're not Dutch, why would you know, used to be a really large chain of department stores, which has been here for over 100 years. Basically, every large town has one. You can see an example of it from 1972 in the slideshow. So it's a very familiar site, but at the same time, it went bankrupt in 2016. So all these stores have since closed down. They're all empty now, which made me realize the smell of it has also gone. I was trying to recall that smell, and I do have some sort of memory of it. But every time I try to put it into words, it sort of escapes me again. So I try to find ways to reconstruct or at least research this smell, see if I could bring it back, even if it's just in the name of Dutch heritage in a way. So working on this issue of Kunstlicht gave me the opportunity to write down this research, which really served no other purpose than my own interest. So that was really great. And I'll read you a little excerpt from it now. So there we are. Since the start of the century, there has been a growing interest in the idea of intangible or immaterial heritage. In recent years, policymakers have even been talking about sensory heritage, sounds, smells, and flavors that are worth safeguarding due to their cultural significance. In France, a law was passed to protect the sound of crowing roosters. In light of that, searching for the lost smell of V&D is not such a strange idea. For almost a century, the department store served as a bland but reliable place to buy household items, books, crockery, and clothes. A majority of the Dutch population has visited a V&D store at least once in their lives. In comparison to big department stores like the Bijenkorf or the French Galeries Lafayette, V&D was not luxurious or pretentious. It was a space where you could also go to shelter from the rain or just aimlessly stroll, trying on various silly hats or leafing through comic books. I do not think it's an overstatement to say that spending time in a V&D constitutes a very common Dutch experience. Potentially, the smell of V&D still lingers somewhere in the brain of millions, and recreating it could unleash an ocean of nostalgic feeling and memories. I started my search by simply asking people close to me if they remembered what the V&D smelled like. Several of them mentioned the sensation of entering the store and being met by the hot and dusty air which blew from the heating system. A friend described the overall smell in the store as sweet, almost honey-like, and a bit like old people. Many remembered the paper and glue-like smell of the school campus, which was a yearly display of notebooks, pens, wrapping paper, geometric triangles, and all other things high school students need before the start of a new school year. My brother said the smell of new books and the South Park diaries brought on a sensation of what he called commercial cheerfulness. His partner felt similar and expanded. The smell of paper reminds me of being a teenager and the exciting feeling that you can become somebody by buying the right stuff. My mother, who was also present for this conversation, nodded along. She told me that the school campus probably started in the 1970s because she went there to buy supplies for the new school year too. It smelled very new, she said. It was the place where you could buy a new pop diary or rhyme diary, and it made me very happy. I also posted my question in a Facebook group of former employees, which is still a lively hub for virtual nostalgia. Almost every day somebody posts grainy pictures of team building exercises from the past, black and white photos of V&D stores, V&D products, or newspaper clippings about their former employer. I quickly discovered that employees are not necessarily the best source for smell memories. Smells tend to become less noticeable the longer you are surrounded by them, a phenomenon called odor habituation. This means that for people who spend most of their weeks inside a V&D, it might actually be harder to recall the smell. I never noticed a specific smell, one person commented. Still, others did share some memories with me. Leather. Even back then, we used a leather spray on shoes and bags that were made of fake leather, wrote somebody called Miep. She also mentioned the smell of coffee in the restaurant, which she called a real boost for every nose. Tina commented that she remembers the smell of mothballs, the smell of chocolate around Sinterklaas, the smell of linen in the linen stand, and the smell of books. Somebody called Arno smelled a remarkable smell memory from the back store. A very sweet and penetrating smell. We looked for years, and it turned out to be dead rats. As my virtual collection of V&D related smell memories grew, I started wondering if it would be useful to find or somehow reconstruct a physical smell of V&D too. In 2021, I spoke about my search for the lost smells of V&D with researcher Chrétien van Kampen, who is the author of The Proust Effect, The Senses as Doorways to Lost Memories, which delves into the potential benefits of smell and sense memories for the well-being for older people. He did not think of the V&D as a particularly smellful place himself. He remembered it mostly as a grey location, somewhere you pass through while looking for something else. But he did see some potential use for my quest in finding the lost smells of V&D. Van Kampen explained that memories can be recalled in different ways, through language-based questions, but also through smell. In the case of the latter, a different part of the brain is engaged, more physical and more emotional. A smell can function like a key to more memories. For example, he says, You just asked me whether I remembered the smell of the V&D, but I replied with an image that came to my mind. If you had a specific smell related to the V&D that you could hold under my nose, it's very possible I would have had a whole range of different emotions. For older people, smell-induced memory can be very pleasant, Van Kampen learned. As an example, Van Kampen named the artist Marije Vogelzang, who recreated recipes from the hunger winter during the Second World War and provided them to people who had lived through it. So this was a period in Dutch history where, during the Second World War, where there was no food at all. You'd expect the smells and flavors of those foods, that the smells and flavors of those foods would bring about unpleasant memories, because it reminded them of an unpleasant time. But the participants really enjoyed recognizing them, Van Kampen explained to me. So these were things like soup made of tulip bulbs and stuff like that. If the smell of V&D could be reconstructed, like the recipes from the war, it could potentially be used to recreate a pleasant experience for a large group of elderly people who used to shop there or work there. So there we are. That's my little excerpt for now. We can move on to the next part, which I think is going to be the discussion.
Yes. So one moment. Okay. So we now will open up for questions. Right now we have one question, which I will, which is a great question, from Tanya Miranova. Hi, Tanya. She has asked us, or has said, I'm a big fan of the Nosetalgia work. Any chance we'll be seeing more scent-related editions soon? I would love to work on another issue about nostalgia or the sense of smell, but then we need another journal to kindly host us. So if you're a journal and you would like to have an issue on the sense of smell, we'd love to join it. But for now, we don't have any plans, unless someone else who is here, one of our other guests, has a plan for a smelly issue of a journal. No.
Unfortunately, okay. No.
Yeah, that would be really fun though. We had a lot of fun with this journal, and we the responses that we received and the openness that we received as well through the contributions was just remarkable. So yeah, I think it would be really fun to do again. Okay, hold on, we have one. Okay, thank you, Liam. And also shout out to Liam for his little nose illustration, which I also put into the slides. So then I will ask a question, and please still, everyone who's watching, please feel free to put a question in the Q&A, and I will then ask. Oh, wait, we have another one. Alexis Kerner, thank you for your question. They say, I am an olive oil taster and educator. I have been incorporating exercises during my tastings to help folks explore the taste and flavors of olive oil through memories. Any ideas or additional publications you can recommend? Wow, I would like to be an olive oil taster, actually. That sounds like a fun job. Yes, I mean, there are plenty of publications. Maybe we can put together a collection and share them share them on the website. Does anyone have any suggestions for? Pachaya, you did the interviews with the sensory objects. Perhaps you have some tips, or did you notice anything when you were doing the interviews that was particularly interesting, or reactions to share?
I'm not exactly sure if this would answer the question, but during the interview, I find that really talking to the person and asking a deeper question about their past and their memory, and basically just being curious about it really helps sometimes. And another thing that I have been that I realized during my research also is that sometimes when there are smells that I do not remember that I don't remember that I remember, so that I don't remember it exists in my memory. That's better. The best way to bring it back is actually to encounter it without noticing, and especially in a situation that you don't expect. So the more unexpected and the more conversational it can be, I think would help with those bringing back the memories. I'm still not sure if I answered the question, but this this is what
I definitely I could add to that when I've spoken to others who have used sensory techniques, especially scent or as a curatorial method, that they often try to put the person in a bit of a more meditational or comfortable state, because it can be a very emotional experience to encounter a scent. Perhaps it brings you somewhere that you didn't expect. And if you're in a museum, for example, so I usually work with in those kinds of settings in museums, then you're in this very public space and then you might feel exposed. So if you're with a smaller group of people in a training, then maybe this isn't so much of an issue, but I think it's still very nice to know that these kinds of intimate memories or early memories can come up for people, and you have to be prepared to to foster those and make sure that you prepare for them. Let's see. I had a question. So I know Emmeren's brought up the idea of smell as heritage and olfactory heritage. So I was wondering, from the others, are there any scents that you can think of that are at risk of endangerment, and that you would like to safeguard for the future or capture for future generations?
I do know an artist who recently made the smell of the internet, and he based it mostly on, like, which I think is now dying out, this I forgot the word, but basically ozone, like the smell. If you have, like, when you're small, you have to go upstairs to use a computer and it's really big, and calling into the internet takes a very long time, and it smells sort of like dusty. Like, that's what he tried to capture in that perfume. And I think, yeah, that's probably a smell that, as we don't have these massive computers anymore, will go extinct.
Computers or printers or these kinds of machines make the smell of ozone.
Yeah, it smells quite nice, I think.
Anyone else?
The first thing that I think about is one of these traditional perfume that I also mentioned briefly in the text, where these days has been replaced by, of course, more contemporary perfumes. And so these traditional scented water, I would say, is not so much present anymore. It also has to do, I think, with a reduce of the amount of flowers and plants that is used to make them. have one of the brand that I have in mind in the moment, although I don't remember the name of the brand. And for me, that would be those things that I think of as the first thing.
So I think myself and Florence, and I think also Lisa, the three of us are in Pachaya, are in the Netherlands, and we're not Dutch. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's true. So the four of us have had the experience of leaving our home country and having to be in this unfamiliar territory of the Netherlands. And I have a very similar experience of the Netherlands as Pachaya has. I felt very unfamiliar. I was very disoriented. So I wanted to ask if any of you want to share your experience of being kind of misplaced from your home or moving away from your homeland and to the Netherlands, and how that relates to smell and nostalgia.
I can go first. No, I obviously came from Belgium, so it's not particularly very far, or a very different. Well, it's a very different culture, but smell-wise, I was thinking what I really kind of miss and don't find here as often is the smell of food that's prepared with a lot of butter. The Dutch resembles more French cooking, but the amount of butter that goes in it, but it's such a good smell with garlic and onions. Here in the Netherlands, I don't know, cooking is different. They do it differently, perfectly fine. Probably, hopefully a bit healthier. But I remember that distinct smell. It's maybe just my grandmother's cooking, to be honest, but that richness of Belgian food, you don't get that everywhere.
I guess it's that more French influence, the butter. Yeah,
I think so. I'm fairly certain.
We're more fried food over here in the Netherlands, like deep fried.
Deep fried and less spices.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone else want to share? Florence, did you want to share? You don't have to share, but if you'd like to share.
Well, yeah, there is something I do notice is that when I step out of the Thalys in Amsterdam Central, I am always sort of attacked with a sort of very strong detergent smell. And the other way, I'm always attacked with body odors. And somehow there is, something I absolutely like and absolutely dislike about both. So it's always a bit of a mixed experience.
It's very interesting. So then in the culture, there's a different use of deodorant or detergents for your clothing and things like this between France and the Netherlands.
I have actually heard that it was very difficult for American soldiers during the war when they liberated Paris. They were really attacked by the smell of, well, indeed the butter smell, like the smell of the bakeries, that it became really difficult for them to keep fighting. Like they were really unsettled by it. So luckily for them, just the butter, just the butter smell and not the body odors. But yeah, it's a very strong hidden dimension indeed.
Yeah, and in the Netherlands, when I come back to the Netherlands, I'm always attacked by the smell of manure or the smell of cows. And I mentioned this to a Dutch person once, and I said, it really smells. And they're like, no, it doesn't. I don't smell anything. That just smells like the Netherlands. And it's this, then you really see the habituation that Amarens was talking about before, where this is your home, you know what it smells like. So I find that very interesting. Can
I share with something actually?
Yes, of course.
It was a funny discovery because my interest of smell also stemmed from the interest of Thai cooking, which we use a lot of herbs or spices in the dishes, and sometimes we don't eat them at all, and we just put them for the smells, and we really try, like, put a lot. anyways, I realized that a lot of smells of the stinky part of the food, of Thai food especially, is something that I don't experience here so much. Of course, I don't eat Thai food as often. But when I was in Thailand before I moved here, I never realized these under smells in a food. So, for example, sometimes if you have bamboo shoot soup, it really smells like old socks. And of course, before I came here, I was like, bamboo soup, so delicious. And when I came here, it's kind of ruined my experience because when I go back, I'm like, bamboo shoot smells like socks now.
That's
So
great.
going back to habituation that you mentioned before, it's that's one of the thing I realized.
Yeah, and then you have that interesting experience where you're closer to home and you're like, this is weird now that I've been in the other in my other home, because I have similar situations where now when I go back home, I have culture shock going back home now. So that's also an interesting aspect of this. So I have a question here for Pachaya from Laura Gessner. She asks, has she considered doing grief work with her aroma tools? She's very gifted and her words were very healing for me. Very nice comment.
Word.
Grief work. I think that means working with people in a more therapeutic way.
I do consider it, and on the other hand, I am a bit afraid to do it because technically I'm really not equipped with any therapeutic work. There is a project that I'm still in a research process, basically continuing this conversation with the smells as a medium, and then trying to use oh my God, I'm really losing the word. I'm so sorry, I lose the word. It's a therapy that involving acting to try to pass through all of these struggles with the combination of smells. And this is by no means using aromatherapy, but using the smell that we find in the reference from the conversation to another person, and using that with this drama therapy, sorry, the technique of drama therapy together. This is really something that I think is going to be a long process, and I think has to be a collaborative process. As I mentioned before, I don't have a knowledge or tools to do grief work per se, but yeah, that's on a way, hopefully.
Okay. So, Sarah, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. I think it's Chu. Asked, really nice to hear your fascinating work. And I would like to ask, do you believe the semantic tips could promote odor memories? I think I understand the question as if certain language can stimulate certain memories. That's how I understand it. And yeah, I think that's one of the difficult things about smelling in a group, actually, or doing group evaluation of scents, is that everything someone else says will trigger something in you or will change your perception of a scent. So I definitely think that if other people are talking around you about a certain scent, then you could be stimulated with a certain memory or with a certain odor that you find in your own memories. Does anyone else have something to say about I mean, I think language and describing sensory memories is an important topic. I think it was Florence that mentioned the limited vocabulary that we have for describing sensory memories. Okay, let's see. Did anyone else want to add something? We have one last question. Okay, interesting question. Merv Celine asks, I'm a wine educator and I'm wondering when it comes to smelling and tasting experiences in virtual reality, please share your thoughts about the future. I had a similar question for us, which was about, because Emmerins, you mentioned the text about the futurist movement and how it's kind of the opposite of thinking back, but thinking forward. And so I was also thinking about this and how the future of our nostalgic memories may be very different if we're all in this sort of mediated world. So how will our memories then be shaped by the technologies that we are constantly in contact with? Does anybody have a comment for that?
I really don't.
Yeah, kind of a difficult question.
It is, but I wonder if we'll see like a movement, because this is based on nothing but like my own hunch. But I always have a feeling that the reason like people aren't really buying into things like the metaverse is because it is so devoid of other sensory experiences. But I wonder if we will see like a movement as technology progresses where also sense, will be more sophisticatedly distributed, or you can really, so I wonder about that. But then I feel like something like smell-o-vision existed in the 50s and has never really caught on. So maybe that's just
there is OVR technology, and they have olfactory virtual reality, and everyone seems to enjoy it. So I think it's working. But yeah, I'm skeptical about about a metaverse with smell. I'm all for real life experiences, but I think sometimes I'm a bit of the minority here. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic, and I do think that our future will be changed. Our olfactory future, how we smell, will be changed with digital technologies, and there are people out there trying to digitize smell as well. So this is also a whole nother movement and topic that we could discuss. But now I'm going to pass it on to Gabby to finish the evening for us. One moment. And also, thank you, Florence, Pachaya, Lisa, Emmerins, for joining me on this ride. And also for your work on the journal as well, and especially to Lisa for all of her work coordinating and being the editor-in-chief and the amazing Nostalgia launch that we had in Amsterdam. So before I pass it on, I just wanted to acknowledge you and thank you for your work and your help with everything.
Okay. All right, I just need control. Here we go. All right. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Sophia, Amarez, Lisa, Pachaya, and Florence. Very, very interesting. So in front of you right now is the contact information to connect with the participants. Feel free to look at it, take notes, or if you need to, you can do a screenshot. Here are the other participants, the guests. So again, either write down the information or take a screenshot. And just to let you know that there will also be a follow-up email with a link to the recording of today's event. And I just want to say, be sure to check out the World Taste and Smell Association's website at tasteandsmell.world. Also sign up for our newsletter on the events page. We have more virtual panels in the works. Our next event is When the Flavor Fades, Culinary Professionals Smell and Taste Loss panel on October 19th. And once again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us to celebrate World Taste and Smell Day. It's been a pleasure, and I learned so much. I hope you all enjoyed it as well.